Welcome to another week of Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino, live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. On today's show, we're going to hear from our senior writer, Matt Moore, for his weekly NBA State of the Union. We'll also get college hoops picks from Nick Giffen, but we start in the NFL. And the Super Bowl spread has gone from 49ers -3 to -1 and now back up to -2. 71% of bets have come in on the Chiefs +2, as well as 69% of the money. As far as the total, 61% of bets are on the over, 66% of money on the under 47.5. So with that, we say hello to our director of research, Evan Abrams. We couldn't wait. We had to have you on to kick off this week. And pretty much since this matchup was set, the Chiefs have been the more popular side. How have public teams typically fared in the Super Bowl?
Sure. So first of all, hello, Maria. We've been waiting 58 years. We finally have a Super Bowl in Las Vegas. This is fantastic. Okay. So looking at the data, the last 20 years, which is the complete of our database at Action Labs and Action Network, 9 Super Bowl underdogs have closed as the public side, which it currently looks like the Chiefs are going to do. And none have done it since the 2017-18 Eagles, who did it against the Patriots. So those 9 teams, 6-3 against the spread, which actually the last 3 have won outright. You had the Ravens, you had the Eagles, and you also had the Giants. So you've had 3 teams, public side, underdog, win the game. And actually, let's talk about that 71% for the moment. Now, obviously, very early in the week, we have a whole week to go. And the record in the last 20 years for any team in the Super Bowl, in terms of total number of tickets, is 68%. It was done by the Patriots in 2019, and it was done by the Broncos in 2014. Those teams went 1-1, so nothing crazy there, nothing to talk about. But the Chiefs could be the biggest public side we've seen in a Super Bowl, so getting a lot of action. And you mentioned it, public on the over, big bets have come in on the under on the game. So that's kind of the market situation at the moment, Maria.
Absolutely. I was just surprised to hear that the Giants actually were the more public side. And I guess it was 2010, 2011. Very interesting. Okay. You hear the saying all the time, hard to win back-to-back titles, only has happened 8 times in NFL history. But when you also take into account the spread, how unique a spot is this for Kansas City?
Yeah. So opened as the favorite in the Super Bowl last year, but closed as the underdog. And throughout this run, except for the game against Miami, they've been underdogs as well. So really just been other team better, but we've got Thanos and Mahomes on the other side, and that's what's kind of kept them afloat. So the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year as dog. Now this year they're back as underdogs again. So this is just the 3rd time in Super Bowl history that the defending Super Bowl champ was listed as the underdog in the Super Bowl the next season. The previous 2 teams actually lost the game. So Mahomes could set another record, and fun enough, a record that Tom Brady doesn't have. Could be the first team to win back-to-back Super Bowl as underdogs, which is a pretty fun betting story, to be honest.
Yeah, totally agree. Tom Brady has been watching his back now for a little while, but rightfully so. Much of the betting conversation around this game has to do with Patrick Mahomes' success as a dog, ATS. Also, Andy Reid with extended time to prepare. What should we know about the Niners and Kyle Shanahan?
Yeah, so Reed's got the rest angle, but here's a fun one I kind of found on Shanahan. And now obviously he's squashed the comeback bug. I think it's a note in the conversation, but the fact that we've won 2 straight playoff games coming from behind, I think we can put that aside from a second. So right now, Shanahan is 6-0 straight up as a favorite in the playoffs. That is the best for any coach since at least 2000. So no one is undefeated with that many wins. And obviously, he had to come back last week against Detroit, biggest comeback in history. But let's also look one other point. The 49ers will be staying on the West Coast for this game, playing at home and now playing in Las Vegas. With the 49ers, Shanahan, 32-11 straight up when San Francisco plays Pacific time to Pacific time. He has won 17 consecutive games in that spot when San Francisco stays west. His last loss came in December of 2021. So we are talking about 2+ years in this spot where San Francisco is comfortable. They're putting in their game plan. They're staying where they are. Seems to have helped, but also haven't exactly faced Mahomes in that spot. So we'll see, but a fun stat.
Yeah, exactly. So very comfortable with that Pacific Standard Time, but also to your point, the Chiefs have plenty of rest, plenty of time to get acclimated
Correct.
to switching time zones. Now, we saw early on a lot of action on the Chiefs money line, the thought being might as well bet them to win outright with the spread being relatively small. Have you found any data to support that?
This is a wild one. It's a fun one. Now, you also have to realize there's only been 57 Super Bowls. Sample size is relatively small when you talk about, other games, other rounds, other situations. But this will likely be the 31st Super Bowl with a point spread of 6 or less. The straight up winner of the game has covered in 29 of those 30 games. 15 dogs have won outright, 15 favorites have won outright. Now, the one who didn't were the Rams. They closed -4.5 against the Bengals in 2022. They only won by 3, so won but didn't cover. So if you drill down a little further, 22 teams in the Super Bowl have a spread of 4 or more, or 4 or fewer, apologize. The straight up winner is covered in all 22. 11 favorites, 11 underdogs. It looks like this game is going to close under 4 or 4 or less at least. So it looks like the streak will either live or don't, but here we are where winner, cover. So if you saw San Francisco maybe win the game by 1, that would break the streak. So we're going to see how it goes. But so far, 100%.
Yeah, so far it's pointing to just pick the side, but bet the money line.
Yeah, I mean,
they brought
it up. They brought it up on the favorites when I recorded this and told them earlier, maybe take the Chiefs on an alternate line. So they had talked about, what would the market look like for Chiefs -2.5, assuming if the trend holds, either team wins by a field goal. It's dancing with a little bit of fire, but it's an interesting look nonetheless.
Yes, well, that's what we do here. Evan Abrams, always appreciate you joining us on Green Dot Daily. Thanks for all the insight.
Thank you. Happy Super Bowl week, everybody.
Here's my 2 touchdown bets for Super Bowl 58 between the Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers. And my first bet is Deebo Samuel. I bet it at +180 right after the NFC Championship game. It's still around +175, and he is the ultimate gadget player for the 49ers. 13 touchdowns this year, 8 receiving, 5 rushing. Looked pretty good against the Lions. 8 catches for 89 yards, had a few rushes as well. Now, he didn't score, but he closed around +125 to score a touchdown, and that's despite the injury concern. For historical odds context, Deebo hasn't been above +160 for an anytime touchdown since week 1 versus the Steelers when he was around +190. Now, this Chiefs secondary, pretty stingy. It's the strength of their defense. 19 passing touchdowns allowed during the regular season, 11 to wide receivers, 4 to tight ends. They also play man coverage at a top 5 rate. So that means that guys like Deebo, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle, they have all crushed man defense this year. But with Deebo getting 2 weeks to finally get healthy, this is my favorite Niners touchdown bet. And my next pick, I'm going to go with Travis Kelce for a touchdown. But instead of anytime touchdown, I'm going to take first Chiefs touchdown at +330. Now, I took this exact bet last year in the Super Bowl at +330, and it paid off in the second quarter because Kelce just has a playoff pedigree, 17 touchdowns in the last 15 playoff games. And this Niners defense is also strong, but Kelce is pretty much matchup proof. For example, the Bills and Ravens, 2 of the stronger defenses in the NFL, they had only allowed 6 touchdowns combined to tight ends all year. Well, Kelce finished with 16 catches and 3 touchdowns in those games, scored first as well in both of those games. And when betting on first touchdown scores, I like to have a little bit of insurance, especially facing a Niners team that has scored the first touchdown in 13 of 19 games this year, including the playoffs. So those are my 2 touchdown bets for Super Bowl 58. Make sure to watch the Touchdown Show on Super Bowl Sunday as part of the Action Network Power Hour. Bonne chance.
All right, let's switch gears and talk some college hoops now with our predictive analyst, Nick Giffen. Couple of fun matchups tonight. We'll start with Miami at Virginia. I know you're a big Virginia fan, so what's the player prop you like in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't intentionally do this, but I am going with a Virginia over, and that is going to be Isaac McNeely. We're going to take over 12.5 points, and this is just a really good spot for him. McNeely is a shooter, and he does not get his points from the free throw line, just 11 just over 11.5% of his points this year have come from the free throw line versus around 19% as a national average. So in other words, he's scoring his points from the field. And Miami, they foul at the third lowest rate in the nation. So they're not putting guys on the line anyway. So that means there's going to be a lot of points scored from the field for Virginia, which benefits McNeely. And even more importantly, it's going to skew toward the three-point shot, which McNeely is a three-point specialist. Miami allows, I should say, 45.5% of their field goal attempts from downtown. That's 13th most in the nation. So that's going to fit McNeely perfectly, who like I said, is a three-point shooter. And McNeely shoot nearly 50% from downtown when he plays in the friendly confines of John Paul Jones Arena at home, compared to around 44% on the road. Now, both of those are high. I do expect some regression, so I bake that in. And still am showing some overvalue on his points here. Also, Miami, a tick up in tempo and pace. So, a few extra possessions certainly aren't going to hurt an over here. So Isaac McNeely for Virginia versus Miami over 12.5 points is my first player prop.
All right. He's averaging just under 12 points per game at 14 in his last game at Clemson. Tip-off against Miami is at 7 Eastern on ESPN. And then immediately after that, it's number 4 Kansas at Kansas State. Which prop are you betting there?
Yeah, so I'm going to go over to Kansas's side of the ball here. We're going to take Hunter Dickinson over 9.5 rebounds. He's averaging 9 in conference play in 9 games, but Kansas State is a worse rebounding team than the conference opponents he has faced so far, by around 3.5 to 4% worse. So that, just right there means he should be grabbing a few extra boards or have a better chance, I should say, grabbing a few extra boards versus Kansas State than versus his other 9 conference opponents that he's faced on average. Also, there should just be more rebounds around to go available because of how Kansas State plays. They're a terrible shooting team. They're 203rd in the nation in effective field goal percentage, and they shoot a lot from outside. And of course, if you're shooting from outside, you're more likely to miss anyway. And they're just 291st in three-point field goal percentage, Kansas State is. So that's going to be a lot of missed shots, which means more defensive boards opportunity available for Hunter Dickinson. Of course, you're often grabbing defensive boards at a higher rate, much higher rate than offensive boards. But on the other side, even on the offensive glass, Kansas State is a great shooting defense. They're 27th in the nation in effective field goal percentage defense. So they're going to force Kansas to miss a few extra shots. So Hunter Dickinson definitely will have a chance to grab some extra offensive rebounds as well. Also, Kansas State's David Gasson, he is going to play despite nursing a knee injury, but if he's limited in any way, whether it's just his physical ability to play when he's on the court or, if he plays a few less minutes than he has been, that's also going to help Dickinson because Gasson is great, a great rebounder, especially on Kansas State's offensive glass. Got Super Bowl in the mind there with Kansas City. So that'll, if Gasson's limited or off the court, he's going to be replaced by other players that aren't as good on the glass, which should leave some more rebound opportunities available for Hunter Dickinson as well. So I'm projecting a conservative 10.4, let's say 10.5, which is a full rebound more than this prop. And like I said, that's pretty conservative. I think there's a lot of upside here for Hunter Dickinson to have maybe even 11 or 12 rebounds in this one.
Very nice. Dickinson coming off that huge win over Houston. He had 8 boards in that one to go along with his 20 points. Nick Giffen, thanks, pal. We'll see you again later in the week ahead of the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
To the NBA, Donovan Mitchell was named Player of the Month in the Eastern Conference after the Cavs went 11-2 in January. Spida averaged 28.6 points, 5.2 rebounds, 7.6 assists, and 2.1 steals per game. He also made his 5th All-Star team. And it's time to turn things over to our NBA Commander-in-Chief and President of Buckets, Matt Moore, for his weekly State of the Union address.
My fellow NBA fans, always a privilege to be with you to tell you the good and the bad from the week that was in the NBA. Let's start with the good and talk about those Cleveland Cavaliers. Since December 16th, when the Cavaliers were coming off of back-to-back losses versus the Celtics. Their turnaround has been nothing short of incredible. They were without Darius Garland and Evan Mobley for much of this time, and yet they've gone 18-4 straight up, 15-7 against the spread. In that time, they've got the number 10 offense in the league and the number 2 defense. Defense we knew was going to be good. It's been good the last couple of years, but to be this good without Evan Mobley is impressive, and the offense is clicking. They've gotten enough shooting to help out Mitchell, who's playing absolutely phenomenal, as you saw in that graphic. 29 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists since December 16th, and they have outscored opponents by 18.3 points per 100 possessions with Spida on the floor. That is incredible. That's MVP level performance. So I have a question. We know that this defense is great. We know that it's been phenomenal even without Evan Mobley. What's it going to take to get Jared Allen into DPOY consideration? I don't even have a ticket on him because I bought into him last year and he didn't even make ballot. At some point, we're going to have to recognize that what Jared Allen does, rebounding, shot blocking, rim protection, he is a major asset to the league's arguably best defense and deserves way more consideration. It's all good in the NBA, and I have to kind of turn to something about the way that the league markets itself. We saw this weekend a pair of games, both featuring the Suns, actually, that were one of the league's marquee kind of ideas. They want to market these quote-unquote homecoming games, and it's, I think, a little overblown at this point. We're going a little bit far. Bradley Beal was in Washington a long time. He was there a long time, and good for him. Did a lot of great things for the community. You talk to anybody that operated in the community, obviously, big deal. It's a big deal for fans. Wizards fans have been going every year. Obviously, that's a big deal when he comes home. But, like, is Bradley Beal a Wizards legend? I think John Wall might qualify for that, but is Bradley Beal a Wizards legend just because he kept picking up contract extensions because they would give him the most money? Like, ultimately, I don't understand the point of these things. We see routinely things like Denver versus Milwaukee or Milwaukee versus the Clippers. These games don't get put on national TV. These games don't get promoted heavily, but Bradley Beal's back in DC. What are we doing? You can't force storylines. The league has to be a little bit better in its flexibility in terms of not dictating what the storylines that we care about are, and instead giving these opportunities that of really compelling things in season, like, oh, I don't know, Wolves Thunder a couple of weeks ago, which was a phenomenal game and got zero attention despite being 1 versus 2 in the West. The NBA has to do a better job in marketing what's actually gone on versus these contrived storylines, especially given the fact that when you talk about player movement, everyone switches teams every 45 seconds. It just can't mean that much anymore.
Well, I definitely agree with you, Matt, that it's kind of a reach to call, Bradley Beal's return to Washington this sort of sentimental homecoming. I do think it was a revenge game, and kudos to him. A season high 43 points in that game. I do wonder about the logistics of scheduling so far in advance where you don't really know exactly like how good certain teams are going to be. So you end up leaning on a storyline that's a bit of a stretch. But I do want to go back and talk about the Eastern Conference for a second. And what I find super intriguing is not only did the Cavs have a phenomenal January, so too did the Knicks, and they went 14-2 in the month of January. And I just can't help but start to get excited for a potential, we don't know if this will, end up happening, but could you imagine if we had a potential, playoff series rematch between those two teams? And it's even more intriguing when you consider the fact that we've seen some vulnerability here, definitely with the 76ers and to an extent the Bucks as well.
Yeah, if we could never mention a Cavaliers-Knicks series again, because I had a lot on the Cavaliers in that series.
I'm so sorry.
And I'm never going to forgive JB Bickerstaff. Like, good on the Cavaliers. They're playing awesome. I still can't take a future on them. Why? Because I will never get over how JB Bickerstaff coached that series. He's going to have to win 3 Eastern Conference titles for me to get over how he got outcoached versus Tibbs last year.
Fair enough. Well, what's one more thing we should know in terms of betting the NBA?
Let's talk a little bit about trades. This is obviously trade deadline week, and there's going to be, a lot of talk. We'll see how much action actually happens, how many trades actually go through. But there's something important for bettors to remember when they're watching these trades take place, and that's don't bet into these markets immediately because the market always overreacts. Let's take the Magic right now. Okay, so I reported that over the weekend that the Magic are interested in 2 key point guard upgrades. They're looking at Kyle Lowry and they're looking at Chris Paul. Those are 2 players that they have serious interest in. They've been looking for a point guard upgrade for over a year now. And they are, in my opinion, probably the most likely to land one of those 2 players. They're at the front of the line, I think, for both right now. A lot can change before Thursday. The Magic moved to minus 130 all of a sudden in the odds for Southeast Division. Now, they had been a dog as recently as Friday. So we've seen this movement already with Miami falling off and Orlando surging. If Orlando were to get one of these point guards, there's going to be a reaction in the market. And there's going to be this rush to bet based off of that news, not factoring in how it takes a while for these changes to take place and for teams to settle in. Think back to the Clippers, the big surge after James Harden was added, and then the huge drop off. You can wait after a trade, see how it settles in. They'll usually struggle early. That's your buy low point. And meanwhile, in that time when the Magic's odds were to surge, if they were to make a major trade, whether the Heat or Magic make a major trade, you can bet the other one in those moments, fade that push with the buzz after the trade. And then once things settle, you'll have a better buy-in point to take on these things because bettors will react instantaneously to this news, but it's not always the best way to go. So in the wake of a trade, don't buy the news then. Yeah. Wait for it to settle, and you'll get a much better price later with a lot of the same reasons you would have liked that bet before at a better number.
I think that's an excellent point. We've seen example after example of chemistry just taking time to materialize. So better not to just have like a knee-jerk reaction to the trade news. And by the way, Magic currently a 1-game lead on Miami in the Southeast Division. Matt Moore, thank you.
God bless you. God bless the association.
Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, you can easily reference by following Green Dot Daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. And that's all for this Monday edition of Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app.